Hello. Well, everyone, tonight, a little bit of a glitch, but we have none other than the beloved Naomi Ozaniec joining us tonight for Magic.tv, but we're doing this pre-recorded using Zoom, making the most of the technology that's here. Naomi is a dear friend, and she has been, I've been a fan of hers for the longest time. She's a very good proponent of the Western mystery tradition, and we're just waiting for her to sign up. Hi, Naomi, can you hear me?
Hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I just can't see your beautiful face yet.
Oh, that's a good thing.
We need to see your beautiful
Okay.
face.
I don't know if we can do the visuals. Why don't we have that?
There should be like the bottom it says
Oh,
video.
hi, I've got him. Hang on.
Okay.
Oh,
And we're just simply waiting for my better half Wade to join us.
okay. No picture yet.
No rush. Just
Okay.
getting Wade on there. You join. So unfortunately, due to it being pre-recorded via Zoom, we won't be able to have a live segment, but we will upload this to the fan page once everything is good to go. Alrighty, still no audio or video from you.
It says the video is now turned off. The host has asked you to start your video. Okay, let's try that. It was working yesterday.
It was working earlier. We had you on video earlier with Zoom.
I know. So you
Did
see,
you
I find this kind of technology just it
definitely?
makes me
Did
bite my
you
finger.
close the window from that, what's it called? That Magic.tv was on? Can you please close that and try again?
Close which one?
Remember the previous window, the link I sent you that we couldn't hear you?
Yes.
Can
Shall
you
I
please
go back to Facebook and
yeah,
close that link
close that
down?
one? Yeah, maybe that's what's
All right,
taking
okay. Just
your video.
give me a moment because I
No
find this
problem.
all a little bit stressful. Let's close that one down. If I can. Facebook. Oh
Hi,
God.
hi. Can you
Good
hear me
evening,
okay?
Facebook.
Wade.
Yeah, hang on. You want
Just
me to close the previous one down? Oh, okay. Okay, I've closed that.
All right, so we're gonna ask you to start video again. Stop video, and then we're gonna do it one more time. Ask to
So
start video.
has the Zoom gone or shall I redo that?
Let's ask to start the video again, and then did you see an option to
Okay.
start your video? There you go. Yes, finally.
Oh, okay. Now I
All
can't
right.
see any.
So anyhow, good evening, everyone, to Magic.tv, Magic and Occultism Without Apologies. And tonight's special segment, we are joined by the ever so eloquent, lovely, caring, motherly figure of the Philippine Tarot Convention and the House of Life, the lovely Naomi Ozaniec. My name is Robert Rubin, joined by my dear friend and co-host and life brother, Wade Long. And tonight,
Hello.
Naomi, it's all about you. We want to know about you. We want to know about your story. Where did it begin? When did you start your journey into this life-changing path, which has made us drink many beers and have many tears? When did it all begin for the legendary Naomi Ozaniak?
Hmm. I suspect it began the moment I came into this world
Mhm. Continue.
because I was one of those children that would have been described as very imaginative,
Mhm.
believes in magic, sees fairies at the bottom of the garden, sits in the lilac tree and talks to things, etc., etc. So, and of course, one looks at one's astrological chart for indicators, but to move swiftly forward into my life, when I was in my teenagers years were very, very full of wanting to read about the occult, the esoteric, the Magick, and these are things that this is a long time ago now. So these were not popular. There were not books and magazines and podcasts. It really was a closed knowledge. But that's what I was interested in, and that's what I carried on with. And then through a series of circumstances, eventually I had a big opening experience, which I'd like to share with you. But I'm also going to say that in answer to your question, I wrote a book, which is my life's journey between 1977 and about 2009, which is when I began to actually write the book. And the book was published this year. And I'll talk a bit more about that. But it's, I wrote it because I was inspired to write down my story, not because I think it's of much value. It's only of value as a template to other people who might think they're a little bit off the wall as well. So I'm going to I'm going to share an experience with you that was very seminal in my real opening and my awakening to the Egyptian tradition. In must have been 1976, I think late in 76, I joined a group local to me. And again, there's a story about that in the book. And like a lot of people, I was very interested in the idea of reincarnation and past lives, and was it possible to access that information? And the person who ran the group said that he took people back to past lives, and he'd done it many times, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So of course, I volunteered myself as a subject. Though I have to say at that time, I was convinced I'd had a life in Georgian England for various reasons. I love Georgian architecture, and I thought that's where this session would go. And just to say that incidentally, much later in my life, I discovered that I am actually of Georgian descent. And I think that's Georgian ancestry from Russia. So I think that's where that notion came from. I'm actually going to share the experience with you by reading from the book. I think this gives you a fuller account of my first foray into being hypnotized, and later on I became a hypnotherapist myself. And this was a kind of threshold experience for me because at that time I was a primary school teacher. My life was very ordinary, very straightforward. And this experience really put me on a new path and changed in fact, it changed the rest of my life. So in England, we might say, are we sitting comfortably? And then I will begin. This is how we begin children's stories. So I'd gone early evening. It was a very warm summer. And we had agreed that this session would take place. So he'd laid out like a massage table in the center of the room, and he'd covered it with beautiful soft blankets. And I just lay down, and I hadn't got a clue what to expect. And here we go. He put me at my ease, and I lay down, comforted by the softness of the blanket. I did not know what to expect. He simply spoke to me using the deep, beguiling honeyed tones that were his speciality. To my surprise, I found my mind moving elsewhere, away from the awareness of the room and even his presence. There was nothing to see in my mind but darkness. Then, without warning, I suddenly felt that I could see inside my own head. It was a very curious sensation, which I have become used to over the years. But at that moment, it was quite new and very disconcerting. When he asked me to describe what I could see, I answered in some strange, faraway voice that I hardly recognized. I had found myself standing beside a wall, and I was experiencing the fierce heat of a different environment. This was not Georgian London, that much I knew straight away. He asked me to look around and describe what was in my mind's eye. I mentally surveyed the wall. "What do you see?" he asked. I replied with spine-tingling clarity, "I see men animals." "What do you mean?" "I see men with animal heads." A thought appeared from the other side of my brain. This is definitely not Georgian England. I knew I was in Egypt. The knowing shocked me utterly. As the session unfolded, I could see my sandaled feet and feel the linen of my dress. And later, as the session progressed, I provided an acceptable Egyptian name, which I slowly and painstakingly sounded out, syllable by syllable. When asked to write it in hieroglyphs, my fingers traced invisible shapes in the air, and my mind outlined pictograms. It was all such a strange process. Questions were answered only slowly, as if part of my mind was literally looking into an old file. Answers formed as pictures or through feelings. There was a curious suspension of thought, quite unlike everyday thinking. No thoughts, other than those presented to me through question, arose spontaneously. Normally, the mind wanders happily from past to present, present to future, but here, in this state, there was nowhere to wander. My mind waited in suspended animation for the next request, and as words shaped themselves and ideas followed, I was surprised at myself. I now know that I have a capacity to move easily into a trance state, but at that moment I knew only what was happening moment by moment. He asked the kind of questions that common sense dictates in the circumstances. But then he changed the line of inquiry and asked a question that changed everything. Is there anyone in your present life with connections to this far memory experience? The answer came back with utter clarity and speed, and in a single word, I said, "You." The response ricocheted through me. Even now, I regard it as a genuine answer, quite unpremeditated, and as much as a surprise to me as it must have been to him. But there it was, out in the open, hanging between us like a thunderclap, a word that could not be denied or sidestepped. Revealing no trace of emotional interest in my answer, he carried on with further questions to ascertain the nature of this relationship. My answers were clear and unequivocal. He had been a father to me. I provided a name. It was hardly a historical reference, but it certainly was an Egyptian name. Once again, it was slowly sounded out, syllable by syllable, not consciously knowing how the word might end once it had begun. When the session was completed and I was returned to waking consciousness, I was faintly embarrassed and somewhat bemused. He retained a level of interested but complete detachment in the unanswered question. Was this claim true? Was this an emotional projection? Was this possible telepathy? Was it a crafty piece of wish fulfillment? Was it an active imagination? Was it a desire to impress? I did not know. However, there were many things I did not know. My soon-to-be teacher was already deeply immersed in things spiritual, occult, and psychic, especially things Egyptian. Though I did not know it, 2 rooms in the flat were painted with full-size Egyptian murals, and much of his conscious life energy had already been taken up with delving into a presumed Egyptian past. He was looking for his own answer to a single question. In this lifetime, he had neither psychic ability nor any inner sensitivity. All such avenues were dead. In fact, according to his own understanding, all these avenues had been completely and deliberately blocked. Apparently, the mediums and psychics he had visited over the years told pretty much the same story. Yes, he had been a person of some authority in an Egyptian setting, but through some misuse of personal power, a decision had been made and acted upon to close him down. None of this was known to me. Moreover, due to his total psychic blindness, he was constantly searching for a woman with gifted sight to both diagnose and even remedy this situation. This was the loaded trap I had inadvertently sprung. I would be interested in your comments, Rob.
Well, my biggest comment is how come you didn't do that for me when you were here? That would have been lovely, don't you think? Like a secret lesson with Naomi. And for those of you who don't know, Naomi was one of the keynote speakers of the Philippine TarotCon last year and made it a complete success. And we're very much looking to have her again this year. And of course, I have a question for you. Eventually, all of these revelations of yours led you to the founding of the House of Life. Do you want to share with us a bit more about what this is and what we can expect to learn from it if we join it and what it's
Yes.
about?
I think that experience that I have just shared showed how I suddenly dropped into this Egyptian trajectory, which is still very much part of my life, in fact, increasingly part of my life. And for the first, I don't know, maybe the first 10, 15 years on my journey, I was involved in mystery school with people like Gareth Knight, who you will have heard of, and Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki, who I'm sure you will have heard of. So I kind of cut my teeth in that traditional mystery school format, particularly a lot of it was based on the teachings of Dion Fortune. Now, eventually, probably after, I don't know, another 20 years of being involved in that, my own journey became much more focused on the Egyptian tradition, and my own inner Egyptian teachers, and that eventually took me to the notion of restoring the House of Life as a contemporary mystery school, really drawing upon all the teachings and the experiences that I'd had with Gareth Knight, with Dolores, and the teachings of Dion Fortune. So at this point in the conversation, Rob, I'd just like to say that the House of Life, although it's an ancient institution called the Per Ankh, the house, literally the House of Life, I am not trying to recreate the past. I'm using the model of the House of Life, which of course is under the aegis of Thoth and the power of the written word to create a radically new template for mystery school at this time. And as we are moving into the Aquarian age, which is what Dion Fortune intended to do, and as she began to break protocol in her own time, she was very criticized by people who wanted to hold on to the status quo. But she was far ahead of her time. Her vision was already to the future. So the House of Life is not a recreation of the past. It's a new format based on a radically new model called the Flower of Life, and you may or may not be able to see it here,
Yes,
but
I see it.
it's a geometric shape that people are very familiar with, and it combines individuality with community. It's a shape that grows, and it is a shape in total contrast to the pyramid, which is the shape of the old mystery school, which is a hierarchical structure with the adept at the top, and then the senior students and the junior students. So you end up with this pyramid shape, and that served its purpose in its time. But in my understanding, and in the light of Dion Fortune's teachings, that time is over. So the Flower of Life is an inclusive model. And I'm trying to create a mystery school without a teacher. That is to say, it's a mystery school based on the teachings, mainly of the Kabbalah, but also what I've learned on my journey. And the power is given to the individual person who starts the school. I can say a bit more about that if you'd like in a moment, Rob. Um, so it's a radical new template. If a person is interested in starting this, the idea is that they start their own house of life
Mhm.
based on the curriculum, which I appear to have spent 35 years writing.
Is that present in your
And
latest book, The Breath of Isis?
mm, and the curriculum contains the books are all both theoretical and practical. So the idea is that a small group of people can work through, and I will show you, for example, they could work through
Ah,
this book,
Garment of Isis, yeah.
Becoming a Garment of Isis, which is an initiatory journey into the Egyptian tradition, or they could work through the Aquarian Kabbalah, which I
Previously called the
am,
Kabbalah Experience, for those who have
which
copies of
is
it.
also called the
Yeah,
Kabbalah Experience and
yeah.
is here. And I'm in the process of revising this into three much smaller volumes and updating the content. And my publisher, Thoth Books, is happy to take that on board as soon as it's finished. And then there's also this book,
Yeah.
which is a book on how the tarot is really used in the mystery tradition. So, my invitation to the reader, the listener, who's interested in the mystery tradition as it exists, as it serves the incoming Aquarian current, not the past. This is not, I'm not repeating the Golden Dawn, that's
Mhm.
all gone. That hierarchical structure is gone. We're looking towards something entirely different. And the power is given to the house. I am not absent. I am there as a consultant. I am there in the curriculum. Your comments, Rob?
Exciting for all. I mean, like for me, you and I've had this talk, and it's something I'm really excited to see you start, especially here in the Philippines, if and when you come back. But it's also a modern way of approaching old tactics because in the old
Yes.
times, it was all about lodge magic. Everything needed to be done in the lodge. But the world is both closer and further apart now than ever before. So I like how it brings power back to the individual to putting up your own individual houses to kind of growing your own splinter cells of these magical
Yes,
practices. I'd like to
yes,
hear
it
from
is.
Wade. What would you like to ask or have clarity on this about?
I keep coming back to were you able to fix that young man that hypnotized you?
Sorry, say that again. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I don't know. Were you able to fix the man that hypnotized you? You said that there'd been a block put
No,
on him.
no, no, no.
Uh-huh.
He was unfixable. No, no, no. I stayed in with his group. It's all told in the book. I was in his group for 2 years, and then I was asked to leave. I was clearly a troublemaker, etc., etc. And that's, by the way, has been the story of my life. That's been repeated several times. And no, he he just carried on trying to find other women. Um, it's a very common story, by the way, as I'm sure you know.
Well, you know what they say, what the gods have put asunder, let no man put together.
Something like that. Yes, indeed. Yeah. However, um, my time with him, though completely traumatic, both physically, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, was a baptism of fire. I did not enter the mysteries in any normal or even desirable way, but I entered the mysteries through trauma. There we are.
It's actually a very common thing for people to get thrown neck deep into the mysteries because their lives
Yes,
turn to shit. It
that's
seems like
exactly right.
when life
And
turns to
people,
crap, the mysteries are there. Like, hey,
yeah,
welcome. Where have you been?
yeah.
And then
I think this is
because of the
really
mysteries, you get out
important
of
to
it.
tell people because there is an enormous romanticism about, oh, I'm a priestess, I'm a magician, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. Well, basically, you're deluded. As Dion Fortune wrote, you give your application to the inner planes, to the inner teachers, and the first thing that will happen if your application has been accepted, your life will disintegrate
Or common to God.
because the life that you have does not serve the tradition, the mysteries. You have to be remade before you can be of service to the tradition. Alice Bailey talks a lot about, she talks about the being englamoured, the glamour of thinking that you are this great, whatever, priestess, blah, blah, blah. Um, and that is totally the wrong reasons to be attracted to this path because it is a path of making and breaking over and over again. There is no romanticism to be had anywhere along this path. It's a form of therapy, deep, deep therapy, deep, deep self-knowing, deep, deep self-undoing until you can be remade again. And even when you are remade again, that is just in readiness for another undoing.
Very
So
the
if I
tower.
put lots of people off, there we are.
Well, anyhow, I'm really fascinated by this because this takes a tangent away from the way magic was done in the past. But it's almost a perfect fit for modern days, especially where people cannot get access to good teachers, to good opportunities to learn like we did before. Like you said, in the old days, you were back in the day, you were like part of a lodge, you join a coven, you join
Yes,
a group, and that's where your growth happens. But that doesn't really happen anymore, which will bring me to the next segment of our show, which is the current events. I wanted to ask you, Naomi, as a person who's been very seasoned in these practices and studies, what do you feel or see as the trajectory of these practices going into the near future? Are we going to have more eclectic and individual practitioners? Or are we
yes.
going to have a dark age of magic where everybody
No.
thinks they're magicians but they don't know anything? I'd love to hear your take on this.
I think we're going to have exactly what you just said, which is more eclectic and individual people and small groups. I think the age of the lodge is falling away. Funnily enough, when I was in Egypt, I met two people on the tour, and they had been long time Golden Dawn people, but they were saying that they no longer wanted to travel 2 hours to the lodge meeting and 2 hours home from the lodge meeting. And they were looking for a new model. And I think people are looking for a new model. And I think the model, I'm coming back to this idea that the school is the school itself teaches you. You do not require a person to be the teacher. It is the school and the structure of the school and the structure that the school is modeled on, which in my case is still the tree of life. That is the teacher. That is the initiator. That is the structure. You follow that. That gives you the inner plane contacts. That gives you the processes that you have to follow.
Mhm.
They were formalized in a lodge, yes, because that was a very formal time. As you've just said, times have changed so much. We are now on the edge, the verge of a different kind of consciousness, a different way of doing things.
So, like, with that being said, from your observations, do you have any concerns or fears of what magic and the mystery schools could turn into, especially with like all these pop culture influencers trying to get into it? Or
Yeah,
does the practice or the path itself has a way of weeding out the bad elements?
yes. As I've just said, I think magic attacks magic in inverted commas. We haven't even defined that. It attracts people for the wrong reasons. They are englamored and they think it's romantic and they think it gives them power over other people in exactly the way that my first teacher felt he had power over me and the other women that subsequently fulfilled that same role. That is always a complete misunderstanding and misuse of the tradition. So, the more we can put forward something that is authentic and legitimate, that is the safeguard against that. We have to put out something that will attract the right people.
So basically, you're saying that it's to the real that we are given the responsibility to put up something responsible.
Yes. In a word, yes.
I totally agree with you. What about you, Wade?
And
What do you have
and,
to say on
and
this?
I just want to do a kind of sideways thought process here, which is that magic is becoming very confused with New Age-ism,
Hmm.
which it is not. And the simplest way to see the difference between the two, New Age-ism is a lovely bunch of flowers. It's very attractive. It attracts people. They love it. And how long does a bouquet of flowers last? And Western esotericism is a great tree that has evolved through the ages, going from Renaissance, Greece, down into ancient Egypt. Which one do you want? Take your pick.
Well, some people, unfortunately, are after only the quick fix. They want the
But
flower one
correct.
because it's easy.
Then if that really is what they want, then they would not basically survive the rigors of mystery school training.
Let's talk on that. Like, let's say you had somebody who was just some green smoothie drinking yoga girl, and she wanted to join the mystery school tradition. What does this person have to expect? Like, is it like a lightning bolt of a life-changing moment, or can it possibly be positive?
Well, what I would say to anyone who feels drawn to this path is that there are access routes, and they're obvious. They are meditations, and so therefore I would give these meditations out to as a preliminary. It's like a preliminary questionnaire, really. The first one is the Delphic injunction to know thyself. So that has psychological and spiritual implications. So that's a meditation. Please go away and think about that deeply. Deeply, deeply, deeply. Who are you? Are you the person created by your family and what they believe in? Are you the person created by society? Are you none of those things? Who are you? And of course, who you are will be revealed in your natal horoscope. So there's two things. You're interested in this tradition, start learning some astrology, become familiar with your own natal horoscope. That will tell you a great deal, including whether this is a path for you or not. So then the next meditation is, well, why do I want to know myself? To know, the next meditation, to know in order to serve. Well, somebody who's interested in New Ages and wants to manifest this, that, and the other, and possibly is not that interested in serving the highest good.
Actually, no, and from their point of view, the highest good is serving themselves.
Well,
So yeah,
exactly.
it brings out the real philanthropist in people. I'd like to
Yeah.
hear from Wade. What's your take on this, and what questions do you have our esteemed guest?
Well, with the with regard to the mystery school and what's happening now, I like to think that we're beginning to shift gears now. That a lot of these, see, the systems are designed to produce a particular type of spiritual evolution in humans. And I like to think that we're kind of already rolling, so we don't necessarily need to start off in first gear again. I
No,
think a
we
lot of
don't.
the
I
old
totally
ways
agree
need to
with
be
you.
updated. And
I,
I'm
t- I
looking
totally,
forward to seeing what happens as we kind of pick up speed and we can kind of start people in second gear and eventually third gear.
yes,
And
I agree with you.
that's what I'd like to see.
I
I think we're
totally
going that in
agree
the
with
right
you. We're
direction.
living in a very different atmosphere to the atmosphere I began in. I mean, I couldn't go and buy a magazine. I had about such things. There was no internet. There was no interest in such matters. The word meditation was a foreign word. Now, this is a common language. We can start in second gear, probably third gear. We're off and running. It's there's a phrase called the externalization of the hierarchy, which is a bit long-winded and clumsy, but basically it means exactly what you've just said, which is that this this knowledge that was once held tightly in small groups is now permeating through society generally, and that is a good thing. That is a good thing. And from that general understanding, it is then possible to attract people into the schools that suit them. What I'm offering is probably a mystery school in an Egyptian tradition and a Kabbalistic tradition. For instance, I am not a Druid. I know nothing about Druidism. That is also a valid path which will attract different kinds of people.
It's interesting to see how sometimes the mystery school approach becomes actually the choice of the more dedicated practitioner. Because what I'm understanding with the mystery school approach by what you shared is it entails sacrifice.
Yes,
And
it
a lot of
does.
people who are in this just for the fads don't want to sacrifice.
Yes.
They want to further in glamour themselves. So I mean,
Yes, yeah.
I'm glad we're on the same
It,
page
it,
with that. Because like right
it
now,
is.
one of the
Sorry,
topic
Rob. Come.
what?
I just wanted to say I completely agree with you because I've already said how difficult this path is. And if you choose to enter it, your life will fall apart in every single way.
But let's also add a little bit of reality to it. For what is taken away, our life will be rebuilt. I mean,
Totally.
a lot of sacrifice would be made if you're going to dedicate yourself to
Yeah.
something like this. Like you could lose your family, you could lose your marriage, you could lose your house.
Yeah.
But basically, what I like to believe about the mystery school is it takes away what gets in the way.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And what you get back in return is a greater, more expansive, more expanded view of yourself and existence. And you actually are, in kind of Jungian terms, you're becoming the person you were always intended to be.
That sounds amazing. All right, so now we're going to be going to the final segment of the show, the Occultech segment of the show. This is where you, the teacher, can teach us anything you'd like. Now, Naomi, I've been a
Oh,
fan of yours for
goodness.
years and a student of yours for nearly as long.
Oh,
I'd love to learn something alongside Wade from you today. What
well,
have you
I
got
don't
for us
really. You
today?
see, there's so much to talk about, and I've covered generalities. But I suppose I'll come back to the notion of if someone is interested, where to begin.
Okay.
And I've already given out 2 meditation points. First one is to know thyself. And that you don't do overnight. That is a lifelong journey, but you have to begin it. And the second one is to know thyself in order to render service. Okay. And if you don't know yourself very well, you certainly don't know where your path of service lies. So those two are connected. But it also means you have to want to serve people in a way that perhaps you don't understand. But through the process, particularly on working through the tree of life, this will become clear to you. You will gain a sense of who you are. And in gaining that, you actually gain a sense of your destiny, of the meaning of your life, and of where your spiritual strengths really are. And it's different for everyone. I never expected in my wildest dreams to become a writer. I was a primary school teacher. Until in one meditation, Thoth said to me, "You will write hundreds of thousands of words in my name." And I thought, really? I'm in school tomorrow teaching 5-year-olds. But it came to pass. But to come back to the idea of where to begin. So we have know thyself, to know, to serve, and to have the heart desire to be of service in some way. And then beyond that, we have the 4 magical injunctions: to will, to dare, to know, and to be silent. If you like, this is one meditation in 4 parts, or 4 meditations separately. So I give these out as meditation points to somebody thinking, do I want to do this? Am I drawn to this path? What is it actually about? So let's begin with the injunction to will, the willpower. How often do you use your willpower? What do you use it for? Do you use it at all? Mainly, people's lives just happen to them. It all happens around them like a series of chaotic currents of which they have seemingly no control. When you begin to understand your will, when you begin to exert your will, you make change. This is the power of intentionality. But then the question is, well, what am I using my will for? Are we back to, I want to manifest a lovely job with a lot of money and a lovely house? What is the will attached to? Well, in fact, the will is attached to finding your path of service. And to will, to dare. To dare. Ooh, that doesn't sound very spiritual. You are daring, you have to dare to question all the things that you ever believed to be true about what you were supposed to do with your life. So you have to dare to question how you were brought up, what society wants of you. And that requires courage, because sometimes you have to walk away from what you thought were the norms of life. And even if there was nothing particularly egregious in those expectations, even the expectation to be normal, have 2 children, a lovely house, lovely career, and then die, that is not living a dynamic and fulfilled life. That is actually living as a zombie. It can be a rich zombie, as we've seen currently, but nevertheless still a zombie. So the injunction to dare is asking you to find the questions, the courage to ask difficult questions. Then to dare, to will, to dare, to know. And this means gnosis in the Greek sense of the word, Gnosis. This is not acquiring intellectual information. And this comes back to knowing that yourself. And I'm not going to here lay out what you need to know. That's for you to discover on your journey. And the completion of that cycle of the 4 injunctions is to be silent, which is in complete contradiction to what we're doing now, but also into the kind of the openness with which we discuss things. And yet there are many things I have never written about, many experiences too private, too sacred, too extraordinary to put onto paper. The mysteries ultimately is a path to mystical revelation. Should that happen to you, you will not be able to describe it in words to anyone else that makes sense. And this is the image of Hippocrates, the child with his finger on his lips over the door of the mysteries, to keep the silence because you can't share it. So they are for signposts, for ways into the tradition. And if somebody has taken those as meditation points and is thinking, yes, I get it, then perhaps the next step is to send me an email. I have the House of Life is open to applicants. You just have to be interested. There is no fee. I do not charge teaching fees of any kind. You just have to purchase something from the curriculum that attracts you. It could be the Egyptian side of things or the Kabbalistic side. I recommend that everybody works through the Tree of Life in any case. So the curriculum is there. And then hopefully you might have a small group of friends, no more than 7. These things were always done in small groups. And the curriculum is there to teach you. I am there as a consultant in the background. Now I want to talk a bit about how these so-called teachings are conveyed in the tradition, because they are not conveyed in the way that we might expect. They are conveyed in symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Everything on the Tree of Life is a symbol. Now, if you have students that are interested in the tarot, which I know you have,
Yeah, many.
all of those symbols that they are familiar with are on the Tree of Life, but in a different context. They are what I call the icons of initiation. So if you've been studying tarot, you're already halfway there. Knowledge is conveyed in a symbol, which can be visual. It conveys far more information than a word or a sentence. But the student, as a student of the mysteries, has to learn to read symbols and to think in symbols. And this, quite simply, is how the Tree of Life works. If anyone has got even a basic interest in Kabbalah, they will probably have discovered that it seems to be a series of lists, which is very odd.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the correspondences which have to be internalized through meditation, through your own work on the symbols. They become part of you, and that you are changed through interaction with symbols. You know this yourself through tarot.
So with that being said, Naomi, I'd just like to allow you now to plug yourself. Do you have any upcoming courses, workshops, books, or your House of Life? How can our viewers
No,
find you and reach you?
I'm finishing a book called an ancient Egyptian yoga, creating partnership with the divine. That's about 80% done. I'm revising the Aquarian Kabbalah into 3 much simpler books, and Thoth will publish those. And I'm working on an oracle project called the Hermetic Oracle, hopefully with one of your wonderfully talented artist students in the Philippines.
That would be lovely.
So
And
I work 4 to 5 hours a day.
wow. Well, the question I was going to ask also, where can we learn more? What's your website or contact details for our viewers?
I guess it's thehouseoflife.co.uk, but people can email me because I would send them the information that I sent you, which is the foundation of the House of Life and the overview of the House of Life, or they are just welcome to send me a question. I am very accessible.
Wonderful.
If people send me a query, I will reply to it.
Wade, do you have any questions for our guest tonight?
Oh, I'm looking forward to checking out the website, and I wanted to pick up that book with the Garment of Isis.
The Garment of Isis. That's there. Becoming a Garment of Isis as inner traditions.
It's a very lovely book.
Excellent.
I got my hands on a copy of that. I'm excited to get my hands on the Breath of Isis. We're just waiting for it to be released from customs.
Yeah, that should be turning up very soon.
It's an exciting time.
And hopefully, all being well, Rob, I'll be seeing you in November.
Looking forward to that as well. So that being said, Naomi, thank you so much for being part of this episode of Magick.tv. We'll have this uploaded tonight, and I'll send it to you to share. But once again, Naomi, thank you very much. Wade, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. I'm just going to hit stop. Good night, everyone.